Hello guys, a couple of weeks ago I decided to read The Hobbit. I'm sure you all know the name, The Hobbit, and you probably watched the movies and maybe you even read the books too. I watched the movies when they first came out. It was a long time ago. I was a bit young at that time, and I have to confess, I don't remember the movies that much. I only remember the main story and what happens. And I was curious about the book, so I started reading.
He was a fire drake from the north.
And I was actually a bit surprised when I read it because, okay, I don't remember the movies that much, but I remember there was a really serious and dramatic mood in the movies, just like in the Lord of the Rings movies.
Far over the misty mountains cold.
But when I read the book, I realized that it was actually not that heavy or serious. Anyways, I finished the books, and when I watched a couple of videos about it, I realized that The Hobbit was actually a children's book. Yes, most of you probably already know that, but it was something new for me, and again, I was a bit surprised because I didn't know that. Then I asked myself, how did they manage to make a trilogy out of a small children's book?
But home is now behind you. The world is ahead.
Then I decided to watch the movies again, to remember them, and also to see what the differences are between the book and the movies. And there was also one other thing I wanted to find out. Over the years, I've seen a number of bad comments about the movies on social media and other platforms, but in my memory, I remember those movies were really good. So my question was, are those movies really good, or did I just like them because I was too young to understand? Okay, I watched the movies. I watched all three movies. So let's just answer the second question first. Are these movies really good? And yes, they are really good movies, I think. But there are also a couple of things that bothered me as well. Okay, first thing first, Peter Jackson is a really great director. We already know what he can do from the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movies.
True courage is about knowing not when to take a life, but when to spare one.
Not so good as the Lord of the Rings movies, I think everyone can agree with that, but these movies are also really great. When you're watching them, you feel the world, you feel the characters, and you also feel the journey. But again, there are some flaws. Sometimes when you're watching the movie, sometimes they feel a bit boring. Okay, I like the movies. There are of course some flaws, but I'm not gonna get into these because this is not about how good or how bad the movies are. It's actually more about my first question. How relevant are these movies to the book? And how did they make a trilogy out of a children's book? Okay, first things first, again, there's a really big difference in the mood and atmosphere between the book and the movies. Because when you're reading the book, okay, there's a story and it intrigues you, especially after the halfway point, and I think it's a decent story, especially at the end, I really liked it. But in the movies, other than the story, there's an atmosphere. There's this really serious mood that pulls you into the story.
To control the other rings, he needs the one.
And the biggest difference for me at first was the seriousness of the movies, and actually I like that. I was also a bit surprised to see that they actually kept the most of the scenes, with slight changes of course, but most of the scenes happen just like in the movies. Of course I'm talking about the scenes from the book, because in the movies there are also lots of scenes that are not in the book. But again, the ones that are from the book are very similar to the movies. Actually I really liked it. When I saw the scene from the book happening right in front of me, I was happy. But again, there are some really big scenes and maybe some small ones that were added to the movies. And that's not surprising because it's a really short children's book and they tried to make it a trilogy. By the way, that didn't bother me. It didn't bother to see a longer version of the story. I like the story. A lot of people didn't like the fact that they tried to make a trilogy out of such a small book. It felt longer than it should be, but I didn't feel like that. I think most of the parts were really great. Yes, some parts were a bit unnecessary, but other than that, I think all in all, it wasn't that bad for me. Okay, what are the big differences between the book and the movies? The main difference for me was the main antagonist in the movies, Azog the Defier, and of course the army of orcs. There are actually no orcs in the book. That was really surprising for me. When I was reading it, I was like, okay, where are the orcs? Where are the orcs? I want to see the orcs. But okay, there are goblins. At first I thought, okay, I don't remember the movies that much, so I thought maybe the goblins in the book are the orcs in the movies. But no, there are goblins and orcs in the movies, but in the book there are only goblins and there are no orcs. Okay, there are wargs. In the movies, the orcs are riding wargs, but in the book, there are no orcs and no Azog the Defier. And the second big difference is the detail of Sauron. You know, in the movies, especially in the second one, there are some really big scenes about Sauron. And in the other movies too, with smaller details here and there. But in the book, there's not even a slight reference to Sauron. None. That was a bit surprising too. When I was reading, I thought I'd see something about him, but no. Maybe because Sauron is something very serious and the writer didn't want to add that into a children's book. Maybe he thought it would ruin the mood of the story. And actually, yeah, these are really big differences and these are what makes the movie so different and actually so much for adults too. Because I think, for example, let's take the orcs and Azog. These antagonists give the movie that feeling of danger, that sense that they have to run. There's an enemy coming and they have to keep running all the time. Run! It gives you that seriousness, tension, that mood. And then let's take Sauron for example. His role in the movies is to give you that feeling that, okay, something going on the screen, but there is also something much bigger happening behind the scenes. Something big is about to happen, and that gives you that heavy mood. And I think these two elements are doing their jobs pretty well actually. In conclusion, I think the Hobbit movies are really great movies. I know I'm kind of opposing the major community here, but I really like them. And I admit there are some really unnecessary things going on in the movies. Some things added just to make them a bit longer or to add a bit more emotion maybe. I also realized those, but even with those, movies are really great. And I really enjoyed watching them a second time. And I also like the differences between the book and the movies because, okay, the book is really nice, especially considering it's a children's book, but I think they added enough material to make it an adult movie series, and I really like those additions.
Welcome! Welcome, Christ!
So yeah, these are my thoughts about the Hobbit book and the Hobbit movies. Did you read the book? And what are your thoughts about the movies? I'd like to hear them in the comments. You can leave a like and have a good day.